Hello, everyone. I'm Mim Senft. I'm here on behalf of BetterSpaces and Global Women for Wellbeing. We have a partnership with BetterSpaces, a company that is focused on helping organizations have a healthier, more engaged workforce. We are so pleased as an organization, Global Women for Wellbeing, being focused on healthy female leadership, to be standing together in creating workplaces where everybody can be included, where issues like pay equity and health equity are being addressed, including leadership equity. Well, today we have part one of a two-part series on addressing uncertainty. Certainly all of us are challenged with this right now, given the world that we're in, and we are delighted to have with us Caroline Ribeiro-Nelson, who is the head of Free Choices, Diverse Mental Health. She is an experienced executive, psychotherapist, consultant, coach, and trainer who has been working in the field of mental health and well-being and an employee assistance support for over 25 years. She has headed operational, clinical, and training positions for leading organizations in Germany and the UK, as well as establishing cooperation partnerships in Europe and the US. And she is also part of the GW4W advisory board and our inner family. So we are delighted to have Caroline with us today for this really important conversation. You bet.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Well, we're going to dive right in because I think anxiety is something that some people have lived with, others have just recently, because of events that have been swirling around us, are starting to experience. But we don't often talk about, like, what is it? What is anxiety?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's such a great question, Mim, because anxiety is something that we all experience. It's a natural part of living. But we only kind of become more aware of it when we have those heightened sense of anxiety. So the anxiety is that sense of nervousness, worry, or feeling unsettled, not feeling comfortable in the situation. And we recognize anxiety when we're doing something like this, for example, having an interview or going for a new job or meeting people for the first time. And this is something that is quite natural. It helps us focus on where we are and what we're doing. But it becomes a problem, Mim, when it's ongoing and it's extreme. And we also experience anxiety when we have illness, for example. That can trigger anxiety. High levels of stress is also a part of that. And also if we have hormonal imbalances or problems with our brain, that can trigger anxiety. Often people feel that it's not something to do with the inner workings of our body. It's just something that we sense, but it actually comes from our reactions to things. And also how we feel and think and behave influences our anxiety. So we have a big impact on that as well. And also anxiety can be there even when we don't actually know the cause of it. It's that sense inside of us. So there doesn't have to be a specific cause, as there is in stress. We can identify in stress what could be triggering us. And so it's our awareness of our anxiety, which is really important, and understanding what that is and where it comes from.
Interesting. Are there people that are more prone to anxiety?
Yeah, I guess it really is, because it can be triggered by the way that we think. Mm-hmm. If we think in a very negative way, or we tend to worry about things, then our anxiety levels will be a lot higher than if we're somebody who's more relaxed, more carefree. We don't let things get to us very often. So a certain personality type can be more anxious as well. But also being prone to anxiety could be just due to what you've been through in your life. So if you've had a quite traumatic life or very challenging, then our levels of anxieties are going to be high because our limits are being tested. So that's about our human vulnerability, which is quite natural. And so that's why it's important for us just to learn to recognize what are the triggers and what's going on for us.
Yeah, really interesting. So some of this can be set very early on in life, I would
Mm,
think. And
yeah, yeah, definitely. And also it can be learned behavior. It can be passed down as well.
oh,
So
interesting.
we often talk about if you have anxious parents, you can have anxious children as well. So
Hmm.
it's important kind of to reflect on that, because when children are forming their personalities and their reactions to things, they look to the people around them as role models, and they pick up ways of behaving and thinking and coping and dealing with situations. So it is something that can be learned as well. Yeah.
Interesting. That's very interesting. So,
Yeah.
so it really kind of, leads into, it's natural. I mean, it happens to all of
Mhm.
us in certain situations, but clearly if it's ongoing, there's can be some pretty severe consequences.
Yeah.
So when we think about this, are there ways for us to build into our daily lives, to protect us, to protect our well-being, to recognize it before it becomes something that impacts our health and well-being?
Yeah, definitely. I think the awareness part of it is one of the most important aspects for this BIM. So it's really looking at what are the signs and symptoms of anxiety, and what are the things that trigger us as well. So we can start with, the signs of symptoms. Is it's that uncomfortable feeling that we have, that idea of not being very focused, of not being able to find our words, of that sense of something is going to happen, but we don't quite know what is going to happen. So we
Mm.
have a sense of losing a bit of control of the situation, and that sense of worrying, that you think that something bad is going to happen. So those signs of anxiety can be very generalized as well. You have no idea of where they're coming from, what the source is, or it could be that it's in a particular situation that you recognize those signs. And when you do recognize those signs, you need to think about, how are you reacting to them internally? What are your thought processes? Are you catastrophizing and saying, oh, this is just the most dreadful thing, it's all going to go wrong, it's going to be it's going to absolutely terrible, and I'm going to look a complete fool, and that's going to increase your anxiety. But if you give yourself some breathing space, and you're able to talk yourself down, and you're able to center yourself, do some breathing, and to look at what's going on for you, then that can help you manage your anxiety as well. And so there are certain things that trigger us all. It could go back to our childhood,
Mm.
and it could be that we've had a traumatic experience or a difficult experience. It could be that we know that in certain situations we don't feel comfortable. So I know that there are situations where I'm meeting certain people for the first time, and it makes me extremely anxious, and I really need to prepare myself. Doing things like this makes me extremely anxious.
Well, you
And
know
so
it. You obviously know how to deal with it.
so and I think it'd be really great to know how you deal with your anxiety as well, Mim. I mean, what I do is that when I'm preparing something like this, I really focus on being very organized and preparing really well, thinking about what are the important points that I'd like to get across, and also doing breathing exercises, doing a bit of relaxation, and also self-talk. Self-talk is really, really important for me. So the narrative that you have in your mind is very, very powerful,
Yeah.
and you have control over that narrative.
Yeah, I so agree with that. Now, I mean, full disclosure, I've actually, from a very early age, I had theater training. And
Mhm.
so being on stage, right? People say, oh, you've been on stage and you get up and you do this. It doesn't mean that I don't feel anxiety
Mhm.
or stress, but I've learned how to use it. I know
Yeah.
that sounds like kind of a strange thing to say, but it kind of comes out of, I always call it the big girl voice versus the
Mhm.
little girl voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big girl voice going, it's going to be okay. It's all right. You're just, really, this is not the end of the world. This isn't brain surgery. You know what you're talking about. It's
Yeah.
okay. And, and
Yeah.
if you make a mistake, you're human. And, being able to forgive yourself, I think sometimes
Yeah.
too, not having, because I love that you talk about the self-talk stuff and and learning how to do that for yourself.
Mm.
You know, I often think about it as be your own best friend.
Yeah.
You know, would you really say this to your best friend, but you're saying it in your own head to yourself? Like, just not very nice. Be nicer to yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. And we can be so hard on ourselves,
Yes,
where when you imagine that we're all human and we have this vulnerability, and anxiety can be a force for good. You can use it as a way of keeping you focused, keeping you
absolutely.
excited about something. And that's all about us enjoying life and experiencing life. If we were numb and had no emotions or no reactions, how dull would that be?
Terrible. Yeah. And how often do we think about, like, you know, am I reacting the right way? How is somebody else going to perceive that? And you think about that in a well-being anxiety perspective.
Yeah.
And yet I hope for many, many people that this past year and a half and going through all of this, um, that there's been time for people to reflect what is important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, as you mentioned earlier, the last year and a half or more, the uncertainty and anxiety and the impact it's had on our mental health has been huge, because
Mm,
it has been a traumatic event where we're experiencing something that many of us haven't fought in our lifetime. And that uncertainty of whether we will become ill and whether we will survive taps into what we were talking about earlier, that existential idea of that we are mortal, that nobody lives forever, and that that makes us extremely, extremely anxious. And we try everything we can to try to not experience that anxiety and to look for certainty in our lives. But the reality is there is no certainty. So it's about recognizing that we have to live in the moment of what we're experiencing and make the best of that.
yeah.
And yeah,
That's yeah. It's so well said, and I think it's very difficult for some people that they want concrete answers for everything, and yet, to your point, change is probably the only thing we can be certain of,
yeah,
you know, in terms of our life. But learning how to embrace that in a different way, and I think whether it's personally or professionally, you know, losing your job
yeah,
through no fault of your own because of the pandemic, or you know, maybe losing friends and family members if you're leading a
exactly. Losing
team.
our
Our
freedom as
freedom.
well.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of moving around.
Our favorite coffee shop, our favorite whatever
Yeah,
that, you know, didn't survive, you know, financially. And it's a lot. I mean, this really, it is kind of an unprecedented time. But I think, to your point, there's if we embrace this a little bit, there's an opportunity to learn and move into a healthier space for ourselves
yeah,
around dealing with uncertainty.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
So when we talk about mental well-being and mental health,
Mm,
sometimes I think they kind of get blended together. And I think it might be great to hear from you how you view protecting your mental well-being, but what ththings should you be looking for when we're talking about a true mental health diagnosis, or something where you really need to
yeah,
reach out and get some support?
yeah. Mental health talks about really just the aspect of our state of mind and how healthy we are in terms of how we feel and are able to behave and perform in the world in a in a way that works for us rather than against us. And well-being is that sense of feeling happy, satisfied, and in touch with what's going on with us and our contact with the world. So our well-being often gets mixed up with health, exactly as you mentioned. So, and I talk about mental health in terms of if we are in a situation where we have become either overwhelmed by situations in our lives or extreme levels of stress, or we've experienced trauma, then this can cause us to be overwhelmed and mentally overwhelmed. And this can cause problems and lead to mental health diagnoses. So It can cause things like psychoses, where we have a break with reality. It can cause depression, where we feel low mood, apathy, not in touch with the world, lack of meaning for an ongoing period of time. And that we feel that that's something quite very difficult for us to come out of. Or we can suffer from anxiety disorders like obsessive compulsive, where we are compelled to repeat things over and over and over again. We have eating disorders, we can have personality disorders. So these are what we talk about when we're looking at mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Mental well-being is about how we feel in ourselves and how well we're able to enjoy life and to do the things in life in a way that we can enjoy it and appreciate it and show gratitude, and we feel good in ourselves and we feel good around other people. And so how do we get there? How do we develop that sense of mental well-being? Mental health, there are direct pathways and professionals who can help us with that. Our mental well-being is about really our choices. What are the choices that we're making? What are the environments that we're in at work and with our families and our friends and in our social environment that helps us feel good in ourselves? There are studies, aren't there, that saying that the happiest places to live on earth. And I think one time it was in somewhere in Scandinavia, where they found out that they had the strongest form of well-being because the people felt happy, relaxed, cared for. And so we all kind of search for that, don't we? That sense of well-being. But we have that in ourselves based on the kind of choices we make, the kind of jobs we choose. Do we choose jobs that give us satisfaction, that help us to grow, that we're able to share our talents, and that we feel supported, we have good teamwork? Or are we in environments that are toxic, that are really unhealthy for us and treat us very badly? What are the kind of relationships that we choose to have, that we're in, that give us a good sense of who we are? We feel good about ourselves and we feel good with the people around us. Or there could be people who actually drain us or quite negative or treat us quite badly. So we have an awareness of that, in a sense, through our anxiety when we're in certain situations, and our stress levels. And so we need to kind of really choose the kind of environments that make us happy and healthy, and those that actually drain us and aren't so good for us.
So important. I think, often when we talk about workplace wellness and employee health and well-being, there are things that people, are told to do without really looking at that work culture. Yeah. And I think it's just so important, what you underscored is that the culture around you, the choice you make to be in a particular culture, can make dialing down anxiety very difficult sometimes, yes, depending on, yes, what your relationship is like within that team or within that organization. And I also think that it highlights what an opportunity this is right now, like BetterSpaces, Global Women for Wellbeing. There are all these organizations, yes, out there saying your bottom line and the health and well-being of your employees is directly related to the type of work culture that you've built around your teams. Yes. And it's not just about how the individual is reacting to it. It's about that invisible water that we swim through, yes, when we're working together, even on a Zoom call, interestingly enough.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that we have a responsibility for the cultures that we engage with, but it's also, when we're talking about the workplace, the employer has a real responsibility to develop an environment where people feel safe, they feel protected, and they feel that they can develop and grow, and that the employers fulfill their duty of care, both physically and mentally, in terms of their employees' health and well-being. And that's where companies tend to fall down, I think, because We have the health and safety rules and regulations, and then the laws on employers being responsible for the mental well-being. But actually, a lot of organizations don't implement ongoing fundamental processes, procedures, and strategies within their organizations that actually make it a reality.
Yeah.
They may have an EAP, and that's the tick box. They may have mental health first aiders or champions where you can go to, but that isn't really an ongoing strategy to really develop healthy cultures.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And EAP, employee assistance programs, for those that are listening that may not be aware, if you are in an organization and you're working for a company and you are not aware of your EAP benefits, I highly recommend you go look at your that particular benefit and see what it offers you. Too often we just push through every day. I think part of the problem is that in many work cultures, we still have you got to be tough. You just got to just suck it up. Just don't ignore it. Just push it aside. But instead of it being like something that's shameful or something that is seen as weak, I think this opportunity for leaders to understand the impact this is having financially to their bottom lines by not addressing it and getting more curious about where are we? What do we have in place? How do we build in safety nets, the right resources, have the ongoing right kinds of conversations with leaders and managers to lead their teams in a healthier way and to be those role models? To me, it's just, and I think really just practically with a war for talent, talented people want to know that they can belong. Yeah. They want to know that they have a healthy, inclusive, truly inclusive, intentionally inclusive working environment, and that they want to work for this organization. And so, even putting all the health stuff aside, from a business strategy, it makes sense that, you're going to be the savvy leader if you're the one that puts a little time and effort into this. And frankly, we're in a world where we will see more uncertainty, more upheavals, more change. Even, you're out competing in innovation, and it happens faster and faster, and you need to be able to pivot quickly, and maybe you don't get to market fast enough or what you put out there, and now you have to redo. And so your teams have to be engaged. If they're always anxious, if they're always disconnected, if they don't feel like, if somebody who has a great solution doesn't feel like they can be heard or they can even speak up, the company loses. And it's interesting that though this has been a difficult time, it is a global experience. Literally everybody around the world has been touched by this. So it also almost becomes like a touch point to be able to open up conversations about this in your organization, and using that as an opportunity. And, we, prior to getting onto the recording, Caroline and I were talking a little bit about, again, just for some people in the world, they had unprecedented loss around them. Others did not. But I think it's just one of those things that leaders really need to be aware of as we're trying to get back to some kind of normalcy in terms of how we work together and hybrid working environments. But, I personally would, on behalf of GW4W and BetterSpaces, ask organizations to think about a specific focus on grief and loss. And it is healthy to talk about this. It is healthy to have resources for this. And recognizing that some people may have lost multiple family members is not, it's hard enough to lose one person that you're close to in your life. And we do not react the same after that kind of loss. So you want to keep your talent, you want to keep those people there. It's a little bit of effort can go a long way. It can build engagement with those people. It can make them honestly a lot more loyal to your organization because you have recognized their experience. So what would be helpful too, maybe as we're kind of wrapping up, are there like 2 or 3 key things like that you would say to somebody that says, I'm really feeling more anxious here, more anxious than I've ever felt in my life. What are 2 or 3 things they should be doing right now?
Yeah, I think importantly, Mim, people should be feeling that it's okay for them to share that it is natural that they are feeling like that, and to get support if they need it. We talk about, tell people about it, talk to people, but choose who you talk to about it, because not everybody is going to be empathic, not everybody is going to be understanding, and not everybody's going to be in a position that's going to be able to give you the kind of support that you might need. So think about who you can talk to that you trust, that's empathic, and can be there for you. That could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could also be a professional as well. It could be your GP, a counsellor, a psychotherapist, somebody who you feel is going to be there for you. And I think also what's important is that take the time that you need. Often people feel that they need to get back on to the treadmill and they need to keep on going. They need to fulfill all the demands and expectations. But it's important that you feel it's okay to take care of yourself, and to take time out to do those things that give you energy, that help you de-stress and lower your anxiety, whether that's exercising, being with nature, spending time with friends and family, listening to music, doing your hobbies, anything that you feel that helps you come back to yourself and that re-energizes you and puts you in a better place, is important. And I think also, don't beat yourself up. You were talking about that earlier as well, that people feel guilty when they feel that they're showing their vulnerability, that they have a mental health issue, or they're not feeling that they're doing so well, and they feel they have to hide it. So many people are going through it. It is normal, it's natural. We are all vulnerable human beings, and it's important to recognize that and to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, love yourself, be kind to yourself. We don't often talk about that in the business context. And yet right now, that's such great advice. It truly, truly is. And particularly, and I will say this is GW4W, so often women in general put ourselves last.
Yes.
Don't do that. Underscore, don't do that, and particularly now. For all of us, male, female, across the gender arc, if we do not learn how to put our own mask on first, and recognize those things, we risk so much. We risk our jobs sometimes, we risk relationships. And now is such a good time to take stock of where you are and make a list of what is important to you, like what really is priority for you, so that you don't get into the whirlwind of, I have a million things to do and I'm running from one thing to another. And I love that you highlighted, we need to stop being ashamed or feeling shame around these things. What's happened around the world has happened to each and every one of us in some way. And so let's use this to have healthier conversations with your friends, with your coworkers, as a leader, sharing your stories. You can help build a much healthier, more resilient workplace. And we are just delighted, Caroline, that you were with us today. And please join us for part 2. We're going to be diving into a little bit more around how the diversity and inclusion piece of this directly ties into mental health, higher levels of anxiety, or reduced levels of anxiety if you do this right.
Yeah.
And some of the ways that we can think about moving forward to make this better for everyone, to have these truly inclusive working environments. So we're looking forward to the next conversation, and we hope everybody out there is having a good day, and we will see you for part 2.